drive shaft through a bit. The thing about not being beaten by this axle, both whilst on grass, is bloody sketchy. Welcome back to 0 to 60. Today we're back on my black 540i and we're finally going to fix that wheel bearing that I started like a month ago or more. And the first thing I've got to do, really before I even start pulling the wheel and the hub off again, is fix up the axle. Because it took, I'll let you see it, but it took a massive beating, obviously, to try and get it out of the hub. So it's a bit of a mess. That is that rust off. It's like it reacted, the rust off reacted to the metal somehow, and it's made a bit of a mess of the spline and all that stuff. So I'll clean that off and clean the threads. But the real issue is how much it's mushroomed out here. It's just an absolute mess. The nut isn't anywhere near going on there, and unfortunately we haven't got any bench grinders or linishers or anything, so all I've got is the trusty Roby, and I'm just going to try and grind it. Once the bulk of it's done, I'll just use a file to they're noisy. I'll use a file to finish it up, and hopefully we can get it good enough without still having to need to buy a new axle. So let's get into it. Okay, I ended up turning the camera off because it was really just a lot of cleaning and wiping and scraping and filing to try and get it perfect, but it's come up pretty good. I ended up using a little file just to finesse all those edges and even put it into that bit there where the nut peens over and clean them up so that when the nut is on, you can knock it into there and make sure it is locked on nice and tight. So now I've got the nut, and it's the moment of truth. On the point of the threads to where the nut threads have been peened over. So I'm happy with that. That's good. Almost looks like a new axle. Cool. Now we get onto the car. Now I don't know if you saw the last video. I can't even remember what was actually in the last video, actually, where we got to, because it was so long ago. But I did have to make this car, I actually put the hub from the parts car back onto this 540 so that we can get it off the hoist and get it rolling just without the axle. So it's actually all been, it's actually reassembled, but to get the axle back in, I'm probably going to have to now undo most of this so that I can bolt the axle up to the diff there and then slide it through the spline and then redo it all up again. So I'll get ripping this apart and slide the axle in. That's the axle in. I did have all of the control arms undone, but I hadn't pulled the top two out. I was trying to pivot it from the top two because I didn't want to pull too hard on the handbrake cable, but turns out to get the axle in here through this way while the hub was on, I should have just pulled them all out and done it properly, but I did end up having to pull the top control arms out as well, and then it still just pivoted on the handbrake cable a little bit, so I didn't have to pull the handbrake apart. And yeah, managed to get the spline through. So that's all good. Now I will bolt it back onto the diff properly and then work on getting the hub aligned. So let's do that. Well, just in case you couldn't see what was going on in that time lapse, I thought I'd give you a proper update. The axle is bolted to the diff now, nice and tight. All of the control arms are back in place. They just need to be tightened properly. The shock isn't in yet. That's going to need some. Swinging to get that lined up. I might need another set of hands to help with that. But that's all going together pretty easily. When everything's tight under the car, then I'll put the rotor back on, then the caliper back on, then the wheel back on, and then test drive it. So it's getting close. Well, I got a bit carried away and I've got to undo a lot of stuff that I've just done. Well, not too much stuff. Basically, I can't get the axle all the way through or enough to put the nut on through the hub. It's all already pretty much everything's done up nice and tightly now. The only thing is I can't get the nut. So I'm going to undo the axle from the diff again, undo all of those, and then drop the axle away from the diff, and then hopefully I'll be able to actually put some force onto the entire axle that way and knock it through the hub so that it actually comes out of this end. Fingers crossed. I hate doing stuff twice, but when you don't know what you're doing, sometimes that happens. All right, let's get into it. It's in and the nut's on. Excuse the gloves, I'm being a bit naughty here, hence the AirPod. It's Monday morning, so if the phone rings, I will have to take a call, and yeah, if I've got to do an order or something, that's why the gloves are on. I can just rip these off and start hacking at the computer. But I ended up calling it quits last night because it was not going in, and my plan was to actually, I wanted to come up, well, probably after hours today, and remove everything again, which was obviously going to be a little bit time consuming, and I was going to hammer the hub over the axle when it was on the ground, so it'll actually just make sure everything is fitting properly, because there is no way in the world I was able to get that through. Andrew ended up coming up and decided that it should be able to just smash it in. So with a few light taps on the back of the CV, he did manage to get it through enough to show a couple of threads, and then once that nut was on, just used a rattle gun to pull it through. It was pretty violent. If I had to redo this again, I would definitely not put the hub on. I would put the hub onto the axle on the ground, because it was nearly as tight getting on as it was to get off. It was literally just in reverse. They are such a tight fit. It's scary. And doing some research, it's not just this car. There's lots of BMWs, even the brand new models. They still use the same method, and it's still the same interference fit for the hub and the axles. So yeah, just keep that in mind. If you are going to do it yourself, I would put it together on the floor and then just slide the whole assembly with the axle and the hub into place, and then bolt it to the diff, and then put all of the control arms in place. I think that will be the easiest way. But now I have just got to put the Just got to put the rotor on, then the caliper, and then take it for a test drive. So I'll switch to a time lapse and get that done. Well, I got a little bit carried away again and I forgot to film an outro. So I do apologise, but basically after this, I rolled the car out and I took it for a proper test drive, did a decent loop, and it was back to driving how it should, which was good. It was the longest wheel bearing I've ever done. It's ridiculous. Definitely the hardest part was obviously removing the axle, but then also reinserting the axle into the hub, which, like I mentioned in the video before, if I was to do that again, I would definitely do it, press it on the ground, and then insert it into the vehicle all as one piece. Yeah, I didn't film it, but we were able to get the axle through the hub just by whacking it with actually use an extension bar to fit through the control arms and then just hit it with a mallet, which did the job, so that was okay. But definitely I recommend doing it on the ground and then putting it in as one. That was really the only tricky part. But obviously if you guys are experiencing similar issues with your E39s, then don't hesitate to hit us up in the comments. I do check them and I will get back to you if you've got any questions. And a lot of other guys have been actually hitting us up on Instagram and Facebook. So yeah, if that's easier for you, don't hesitate to hit us up there and we will help you with anything. If this video wasn't clear enough in any of the steps, then yeah, we can talk you through it any other way. But yeah, if you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. And as always, we'll see you in the next one. Peace. That's not gone well.